Well, it's been a while, but hi there once again, and welcome to another Expresso mechanic tutorial. And in this one, we're going to be taking control of the timeline via Python. Now, a shout out goes to the Triple Tiger for this tutorial because he got in touch with me and asked if it would be possible to actually do this, and I knew it would be a job for Python. And what he wants to be able to do is basically skip to a number of different shows and frames using radio buttons. So we've got some user data over here, and we can see here that we've got skip to frame, and we can switch this on and off. If we switch it on, instantly we can see that the timeline has jumped to frame 5, and our radio button here is frame 5. If we select the next one down, we skip to 15, 29, 58, and finally 73. These are the frames that I've set up. They're not necessarily the frames that the Triple Tiger wants to use, but I'm going to show you how to do this, and you should be able to adapt it to your needs. Okay, that's what we're going to be about in this tutorial. So without further ado, let's see if we can make this happen. We start by getting hold of a null, bring that into the scene. And then the thing to do is add a Python tag. And we've got one of those. I'm not going to bother switching to a different layout because there's no real need for this. There's not enough code to worry about. So if we just get rid of all of this so that we've got our main function ready to go, that will be fine. And then we can think about setting up our user data on the tag. That's what we need to work with, the tag. So with the tag selected, we've got it here, user data, add user data. The first thing I'm going to do is add a group. I'm going to call it controls. And then we can think about adding the data. The first data here, we might as well just drag that in. The first data that we require is actually going to be a Boolean. And we can call this skip to frame on /off, and that gives us our first piece of data. The default will be off. I'll add some more data, and this will be a separator, so I'll select one of those. I'll check separator line and then remove the title because we just want the line, we don't want data next to it. Add some more data, and now we can think about which frames we want. Now, for this, it's an integer, and the interface will be radio buttons, and then we can set these up and get them working. We're just going to call this frame, and that's great. So we've got that far, and we can see here that we've got a value, a semicolon, and then a string. So if we say 0, semicolon, put a space after it, we'll say 5 because we know that our first frame that we wanted to skip to was frame 5. And then we can say 1 semicolon 15, 2 semicolon 29, 3 semicolon 58, and finally 4 semicolon 73. And that should be fine. Let's just look at our details here. I don't think we need to do anything there. Example, we've got it there, and that's what we need it to be. So they're all set up and looking great, so we can hit OK, and we've got our user data. We can just take control of that from there. So everything that we need is now here, and we can start thinking about where we're going next with the Python. If we just come back into our window, under our main, we can just put another return in there. First thing I'm going to do is grab hold of this and drag it in, and I'm going to say if op is equal to, and it will be true. So if our bool is checked, we're going to do something. If not, we're not going to do anything at all. The next thing we can worry about is bringing in the frame. So we'll bring that in, drop it here, and we can then say if op, and after we can then simply say is equal to 0. So if we've selected 5, that's what we're interested in here. Now comes the most important line. Frame is equal to, and it will be C4D dot BaseTime. And then in brackets, and I'll explain all of this a little bit later, 30, comma, or rather 5, I beg your pardon, comma 30. And then the final piece of code that we need for this is doc dot set time brackets frame. Okay, so what's going on here? Well, obviously we're checking to see which of these has been checked. That's fine. So we know that if it's 0, we want to go to 5 frames. We've already said that. The frame variable here, BaseTime, is what's used to control the timeline. So what we're doing here is simply dividing 5, which is frame 5, by 30, which is the frames per second. And then basically we're saying to the document, which is of course the open scene in Cinema 4D, set the time to our frame value. Let's see what happens if we switch this on. Straight away it works. We're there, we're at frame 5, so that's working fine. Now this numbering system here is not absolutely hard and fast. We'll start looking at some of the other frames and getting their data in now, and then we'll look at some situations further down the line that are a little bit less straightforward. But anyway, let's carry on. So what we'll do is copy this code and place it here, and we can simply say is equal to 1. So now we're looking at frame 15. Now frame 15, we can say 15 divided by 30. Now 15 divided by 30 is 0.5. So we can reduce this down to 1 divided by 2, which will give us half. So let's see what happens when we execute this. If we just press 15 here, straight away it works. We're at frame 15. So that's fantastic. So you can see how this is working so far. Let's continue. Paste again is equal to 2. And now we're interested in frame 29. Okay. We can simply say 29 divided by 30, and that will work. That will get us to frame 29. So let's just check, and it does. There we are at frame 29. Now at the moment we've dealt with 1 second's worth of frames, because if there's 30 frames to a second, we can have anything between 0 and 30, and we'll be okay using this particular situation. As I say, this could be 15 and 30. That will be fine. Now it gets a bit more interesting from here in, because we're dealing with frames 58 and 73. So let's just paste again is equal to 3, and let's see what we have to do with this. Now we're into our second, so basically we're looking at frames between 31 and 60. So we can't really use 30 as the number quite so easily, and these numbers here are going to have to be different. So what we've got to do is say on this occasion we put the 60 here, and this we say 31. And if we check our radio button down here, straight away we jump to frame 58. That's good, but suppose we wanted to get to frame 59. It's not quite so easy. Let's see what happens. If we just divide by 30, let's see what that does for a start. Just execute that, and that puts us at frame 60. So if 31 is 58 and 60 is 30, you would think that we could say 30.5, and that would get us to frame 59. Well, let's see what happens. It goes back to 58 because it rounds down, and it doesn't help us to actually get to where we want to get to. I'm going to leave that as it is. Let's put it back at 31 because I wanted to go to frame 58, and I'm going to move on to frame 73, and then we'll see what we need to do to sort this problem out. Let's just do that is equal to 4, and let's see what we need to put in here. Well, we're into our 3rd second now, because of course frame 73, it's between frames well, it's between frames 61 and 90. So we're into our third second. So if we want to go to 73, what have we got to do? You'd think we'd have to say something like 90 divided by something in here. That does present us with a bit of a problem though, because if we do that, let's just see what we get now. That's taken us to the end, so that's taken us to frame 90, which makes sense because 90 divided by 30 is 3, so that would take us to the start of our third second. But if we wanted to go to 73, you think, well, perhaps we could divide by a bigger number than 30. Perhaps we could say 40. Let's just see what that gives us. Well, that's taken us to 67, so okay, that's too far. Let's say 37. Let's try that. Well, that's got us to 72. Okay, so let's try 36. And where does that get us? That gets us to 75. Oh dear, we've got a bit of a problem, haven't we? The solution is to go bigger. If we say 100, and I happen to know that it's 100 divided by 41, that will get us to 73. Okay, so you've got to do a little bit of playing around in order to get this to work sometimes. Sometimes it's very straightforward, other times it's not so straightforward. That's the golden rule with it, okay? It would be far easier if only we could work with frames. I mean, we can create our ubiquitous frame variable that takes the frames from the timeline. That will give us the current frame. You've seen me do that a number of times. But unfortunately, what we don't have, because obviously that uses get frame. It uses that convention. Now, you'd think there would also be set frame, wouldn't you? And then we could just say set frame at 23 and it would jump to frame 23, probably by using a variable such as frame. If we said frame dot, set frame to it, but you can't. It doesn't allow you to do it. It's just not there. There is no such thing as set frame, which is a great pity. Come on, Maxon, do it for us if you're listening, and I know you're not. But it would be great if we had that. But unfortunately, we don't. We have to use set time. That's as close as we can get it, and we've then got to use this, the frame you want divided by the frames per second if you're using it down here. It's a bit of a strange convention sometimes, but unfortunately, it's just something that we have to live with. But anyway, that just about completes the tutorial, because that's all I need to do in order to make this work. Now, one thing you've got to, before I do go though, one thing you've got to do, at the moment, we've got this checked. Now, if I try to run the timeline, it doesn't do anything. It's stuck at 75. So check that off and then run the timeline and it's fine. Go back to here, switch it on. You've got to, obviously, if you select a new radio button, you must switch back on, otherwise it won't jump to the frame. Switch that off, and once again, you can run from that frame. Okay, so hopefully it might be useful to a few people out there, and obviously the Triple Tiger, I know it's going to be useful to you. So have fun with it. See if you can set it up with your different frames and see what you have to do. Hopefully it's relatively straightforward, but there will be some trial and error if you're going over a certain level. I think it probably gets more tricky the higher you go along the timeline. If you've got 1,000 frames and you want to jump to frame 759, it's going to be a bit of a bind to sort of work that out, maybe, or maybe not. But it is what it is. Unfortunately, we just don't have set frame. Come on, I really wish we did. But anyway, that just about brings us to the end of this tutorial. As always, I really hope you've enjoyed this one and that it's been some use to you. And if you have enjoyed the video, please give it a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and of course, ring the bell. And wherever you happen to be on social media, please do share this video, because all this good stuff really does help keep the channel moving in the right direction. But that just about wraps this one up. So I'll see you at some point in the future on the next one.